Good afternoon. My name is Daniel Begg from Connect Search. Connect Search is an international search firm based out of the UK, and I lead the grocery retail practice. As part of our new video podcast series, today I'm speaking to Thomas Gasser. Thomas is a senior supply chain and logistics executive based in Switzerland, and he brings more than 20 years experience working across Europe. Thomas, great to meet you, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel. Nice to meet you.
Thomas, if I can start by asking you where you see the biggest challenges in supply chain and logistics in the next 6 to 12 months.
Yeah, one of the most obvious things is that we've been challenging the pandemic or the post-pandemic. And I think we have many external factors. So that have been said, we recognize one of the largest bullwhip effects I've ever recognized. And we have those shortages of chips. We have ships, vessels waiting to be disembarked. We have very high freight costs. So we really have these issues with the pandemic, which are distressing us. And further, I would say we have like rising nationalism, we have trade conflicts, which seems to occur. We have a rising demand of economies which have been rather supplying, but now are demanding as well, such as China or India. And we have the rising demand of durable products in many markets. So we have these external factors which will give us many challenges for the next 6 to 12 months. But we have also internal factors. So I would say that the higher degree of digitalization leads to a higher vulnerability towards cybercrime. We have the high focus on cost, which really lowers flexibility, which is something that has been challenging us during the last months. And to cope with all of this, I would say it's very difficult to get the right staff, to get the right talent to oversee all these challenges. And in general, I see the balancing between like very lean supply chains and very agile ones. And this balance needs always to be redone when such major incidents occur as the pandemic.
Yes. It's interesting that you touched upon trade there. You mentioned a couple of companies. It's a word, countries, I beg your pardon. It's a word I don't like to use, and that's Brexit. It happens. What impact do you see that have? And how do you see future trade relations with the UK?
The Brexit is indeed a word I've heard many, many times within conversation with my colleagues. And I would say that one of the most intriguing things was the uncertainty which was brought by this process. The uncertainty before the decision, but even when it was clear that Brexit is going to happen, it was not clear which were the terms, which were the rules of this ongoing process. And I would say that for a supply chain, it's always challenging to cope with such huge changes. And it's like a new game that's starting to play, and you need to find solutions, and you need to readapt and optimize later on. And of course, you always try to do something preemptive, and therefore you need to define scenarios on a strategic level, break them down to operational level, and try to find solutions. And most probably some of companies were very successful in doing this, even for the Brexit, and other companies are now in the terms of coping with with the leftovers of their decisions, and need to recatch and readapt.
Yeah. Interesting that you mentioned that period where there was a state of flux, because that went on for such a long time. It was kind of BAU, but we knew these changes were coming. So do you think it will have more of a detrimental effect on Europe or on the UK?
I would say rather on UK, because I recognized that many companies have used the UK as a market bridge to enter into the European Union. And as of now being outside of the EU, this means those companies need to reshift and find new headquarters in Luxembourg, in Amsterdam, in regions within the EU. And so I would say it's rather restricting UK companies to act successfully. And of course, it isolates UK also a little bit from the open markets, from the labor market. It's new game, it's new rules, and every supply chain executive will optimize the processes. So after a few years, it will be stable and won't be a huge topic anymore. But currently, I would say it's a disadvantage for the UK.
Yeah. And again, interesting that you mentioned about access to labor, because from a supply chain perspective, and I'm sure we'll come on and talk about this a little bit later, but we've noticed an impact in the terms of the lack of hauliers and some of the haulage issues that we've faced directly in the UK. I know that's not exclusive, and the EU is also impacted, but it's something that we've felt. Thomas, we've increasingly noticed we're doing more work in the ESG space. Sustainability is becoming a rising topic on the agenda of many organizations. From a supply chain perspective, what do you see changing to accommodate that increased focus on sustainability?
I would say all in all, as long as efficiency and sustainability goes the same way, it's very easy for a supply chain to optimize, to get cheaper and thus less resource consuming, and to become more sustainable. But as soon as you have a dilemma within cost and the sustainability, it becomes difficult. Of course, nowadays you have more and more customers being aware of that fact. You have investors being interested in sustainable assets. And so sustainability gets a price tag and gets into the consideration of supply chains, of course. And I would say that supply chains become shorter as they are more efficient. They become shorter because you have with higher robotization, you can produce not only in countries where you have low wages, but also in countries that are closer to the consumer. And also a new aspect is the aspect of circular economies. So I would say that already in design of the supply chain, in design of the product cycles, you gain new possibilities to become more sustainable, and thus having different supply chains. Mm-hmm. And the more digitization, the more transparencies you can create, the better you understand as well where you have an impact with the supply chain to support the business and to gain sustainable solutions.
Very interesting. And again, that's a topic that I was going to raise, actually, and I'll do so in a moment. I know in your experience that you work very closely with suppliers and the best way to integrate those into your supply chains, the CPG companies. Have you noticed a shift in terms of sustainability, where you vet those customers and you are more attracted to suppliers that have very positive, sustainable either products or packaging, or their ethos is very sustainability friendly, if I can put it that way?
I mean, I've been working many years for a company there where sustainability is really a high topic. And of course, when you integrate suppliers, not only first tier, but second, fourth, when you go further and really control the supply chain, you find solutions to provide or to give the supply. Sorry, to give a value for the customers, a value for the suppliers, and a value for the whole chain, just to make sure that it gets more and more sustainable. And it goes along with digitization. And I think that digitization is really a trend within all the supply chains. And the customer moves shorter, moves closer to the producers, to the suppliers, and you can rearrange these supply chains.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, thank you. And in terms of the digitization, that's a good segue, because I wanted to ask you how digitization is allowing for omni-channel supply chains to become the norm. What do you see in that space?
Omnichannel gives more complexity to a supply chain. It creates new ways of delivering products, and thus being able to fulfill this, you really need to integrate the physical part of a supply chain, but also data and just to make sure you can steer this complexity. And I would say, without having the tools of digitization, omnichannel in many parts would not be affordable today. But to have these tools, to have the better data for forecasting, in-chain optimization, and even to learn after the product has been shipped, you really can gain efficiency, and on the same time you can give a value to the customer who has more convenience. For the customer, it's easier to get the product. And so I would say digitization is really an enabler on two sides. On one side, giving the customer more convenience, more choice, but on the other side, to regain efficiencies after such supply chains have become more and more complex.
Mm-hmm. It's a market that's growing and going to continue to grow. The pandemic really expedited and highlighted the need for efficient processes. And I've seen many quite innovative and pioneering ways of this being affordable, being efficient, and being green. Can I ask you about robotics? Because certainly if I look to North America, a number of trials and a number of live scenarios have happened where, if you focus on the last mile delivery, that's conducted by robots. Do you see that? I don't want to say taking over, but do you see that as the way forward? Do you see that landing on European shores at some point?
Absolutely. I mean, I see still the challenges that come with robotics, but the development towards robotics is in many ways very interesting. A robot is very precise. A robot will become cheap, and with data, with robotics, you will gain a totally different way to steer supply chains and to optimize them. You find new ways to inform your customers about the status of a product. You find new ways to individualize the service, because as long as you have a human performing a certain service, it's not clear, or it's very heavy to train him to do this very precisely and very individually for thousands of customers in an individual way.
Mm-hmm.
But as long as you have robots, you can program them, and you can transform an idea that is it's thinkable into reality. But of course, the path to do so, it's a game changer. You need to change the culture. You need to change the people that are doing this. You need people to understand how robotics works, how you can program them. So it's really a mind shift. And of course, you have physical constraints like weather conditions, difficulties in recognizing obstacles, difficulties from technical perspective. But I would say the main difficulty is to change the culture, the mindset of the people, and then to find talents who are able to provide such to cope with these challenges.
Mm-hmm. And over time, would you say that that is a sound investment on behalf of a corporation, in terms of there's going to be a huge capital investment initially in the robots, the programming, but actually over time, you're saving costs on a labor perspective. So do you see it having a positive cost impact on what customers might expect to pay for the service?
That is difficult to say in general. I think it's attractive to invest in such experiments, but it's very important to learn from them. And as soon as you learn, you will gain insights either for your traditional way of doing business as for new ones. So the learning aspect is, of course, very important. On the second perspective, you need to say that, of course, an investment might be heavy in the beginning, but then, as you said, yes, you can profit from optimization. This is, of course, bring you efficiencies, but it needs as well costs you did not have on the radar before. You need IT specialists, you need programmers, you need trained people doing maintenance. So that's the cost aspect can be one. The next aspect would be that it adds value to the customer. And in combination from adding a value and being cost efficient, this is certainly of a certain interest. And in many of these businesses, I mean, in the traditional world, you either have been cheap or have provided excellent service. And in today's industries, you have like a platform value. So that's from learning, that's from interconnecting data, that's, yeah, and as soon as you have a certain robotization, as soon as you have the data, as soon as you really can control and command the supply chain, you gain the potential to achieve platform efficiencies as well. So scalability is a wholly different thing when you're robotized than when you have traditional workforce.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Very interesting. We said they'd take over the world one day. Thomas, I wanted to speak to you about seasonality, about peaks and troughs, focusing on supply chain and logistics. In the very early stages of the pandemic, we saw products and supply chains, certain products and supply chains really struggle. It only takes a small percentage of the population to panic buy, and the rest follow. In terms of seasonality. Obviously, Christmas is approaching. We've already seen some products be in huge demand. People are talking about a lack of turkeys, and there are other seasonal products. How can retailers best prepare for peaks and troughs?
Actually, in the pandemic, this was one of the really, really interesting learnings for me personally. This was what was impressive to see. When you want to steer this or to manage this demand, you can work on the supply side. So of course you need to build more stock to gain certain flexibility. You could find faster supply chain solutions. So instead of using a vessel taking weeks from China to Europe, you transport by road or by train or in a combination, or you take even the aircraft. So you can find solutions to make a faster supply chain. Even when you shift to omni-channel solutions, so you don't ship first to your warehouse, but directly from the supplier to the customer, this might be a way to gain on the supply side. On the supply side as well, you can prioritize the products, and you really need to understand which products are very key for Christmas or to make the turnover or yet to gain, and which are not so important. And in the same time, you can reduce variance. So instead of offering different colors, which is difficult to forecast, you reduce it and you make the product more available through less variance. And to do this, you need to gain visibility to better understand which products you need to push and which ones to pull back. And that leads me to the demand side. Also, on the demand side, you need to actively manage it. You need to inform your customers proactively how the lead times are. And when you have a view on the supply chain, you're able to recommend your customers alternatives. And in such situations, you can always manage it through the price as well. So you make sure that maybe before Christmas, the prices are higher than usual to make sure that the demand comes later on. And maybe you gain some margins and can postpone the demand. But of course, these strategies work short term, and in the long term, it can be very, very risky because customers might not be happy. And sometimes I think, in retail, it's always interesting to sell new goods, but sometimes it would be very easy to offer a marketplace to make sure that also used goods can be resold. This is interesting from a sustainability perspective, but it's as well very interesting from a shortage perspective, because you can fulfill the demand of your customers. You can have different suppliers from the second-hand market which are happy, and you might have the same margin even without selling new products because you offer the marketplace.
Yeah, undoubtedly one of the biggest challenges for retailers, and particularly at this time of year. I know that they've been getting ready for months, but it's firmly upon us. So yes, thank you. We spoke about labor shortages. We spoke about the relationship between the UK and the EU. I spoke about the certainly the haulage shortages of drivers in the UK, and it was well publicized. Obviously, these short-term visas being issued to EU citizens to come over and drive trucks in the UK. What are the EU doing? What can they do to arrest that shortage of haulage drivers?
One thing that is obvious, it's to rise wages. I mean, you have this shortage because it's a demanding job, because you have crowds of people from low wages markets entering to the EU, and as soon as you exclude them from the labor market, you have a shortage because you just don't get enough drivers who would like to work for you. So really, to raise these wages is a short-term way. Within this shortage, it's a little bit intriguing. We have been talking about the robotics and so on, and autonomous driving is something that will come in, and in a longer term perspective, it might be not attractive to learn how to drive a car or a truck and to provide these services. So in a long-term issue, we might not have this problem or long-term perspective. But for sure, when you have shortage, you just need to gain new workers. You need to rise wages, make the job more attractive. And maybe when you have higher paid people, you're also in the possibility to provide your customers a better service, and you might really profit from it, having higher costs, but using it to generate value as well.
Yeah. Thomas, that's excellent. Thank you very much. And we've covered a range of topics there: the digitization, the robotics, the labor challenges. Very interesting, you talking about the supply chains becoming shorter. We've touched on sustainability, and you've shared some really insightful thoughts. So I'd like to thank you for your time today. Really do appreciate it. And I look forward to speaking to you again.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, and a nice afternoon.